So the big news is that Anthony Fauci is retiring, but it's not exactly that simple. He's not actually retiring. He's just leaving his current position. And if you thought him leaving would mean we are in the free and clear, think again, because actually things could get much, much worse. He may have more power in many ways stepping down from the position he's in. He'll certainly make a lot more money, but he actually might have quite a bit of extra influence. And we're going to talk about that. But first, let's go ahead and go over his statement. So he says here, this was written yesterday, I'm announcing today that I will be stepping down from the positions of Director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and Chief of the NIAID Laboratory of Immunoregulation, as well as the position of Chief Medical Advisor to President Joe Biden. So he has a lot of different titles there, and he's leaving all three. He says, I will be leaving these positions in December of this year to pursue the next chapter of my career. Now, obviously, part of him leaving will be that it's pretty clear the writing is on the wall that Republicans are going to be taking at least the House, maybe the Senate, but at least the House. And if they take control of the House, they have already stated they're going to be investigating Anthony Fauci. And him stepping down is not actually going to be changing any of that. They still say they're going to be going after him about potentially the lab leak. They're going to be investigating him for the lab leak. Now, I think that there's a lot more to investigate him over, but lab leak being one of them, I would say much of the pandemic response, there's many questions. Maybe things aren't criminal, but certainly there's a lot of questions Americans have, because what we want to do is we want to prevent the same style of all these mandates that were that were utilized, all the recommendations, the hypocrisy, the flip-flopping. We would want to streamline this and make it better and not have all of those inconsistencies moving forward. Hopefully we've learned something, is my point. So I do think that there should be congressional hearings to discuss what we can learn moving forward in the future. I would hope that they would say lockdowns don't work and mandates don't either, ripping kids out of schools, creating the biggest wealth heist in the history of probably mankind, with all of the wealth funneling up to the top during this pandemic. There's a lot to investigate, a lot of questions there. Again, not criminal, but a lot of questions in order to ensure that we don't end up in this situation again. So he says, it has been the honor of my lifetime to have led the NIAID, an extraordinary institution, for so many years and through so many scientific and public health challenges. I'm very proud of our many accomplishments. I've worked with and learned from countless talented and dedicated people in my own laboratory and NIAID and NIH and beyond. To them, I express my abiding respect and gratitude. He goes on to talk about his accomplishments. Over the past 38 years as NIAID director, I've had the enormous privilege of serving under and advising 7 presidents of the United States, beginning with President Ronald Reagan, on newly emerging and reemerging infectious disease threats, including HIV/AIDS, which he also botched. It was a very similar response to what we saw to COVID. Over exaggerating the threat levels, causing a lot of demonization, pushing drugs that ended up not being effective. I mean, there's a lot of very similar response. He didn't learn anything from that. Instead, just marched forward saying this time we were going to get it right, which they didn't. West Nile virus, the anthrax attacks, pandemic influenza. Again, a lot of questions about even the pandemic influenza responses, various bird influenza threats, Ebola and Zika, amongst others, and of course, most recently, the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm particularly proud to have served as the chief medical advisor to President Joe Biden since the very first day of his administration. Why is he particularly proud to have served under President Joe Biden? He served under 7 presidents of the United States, but he's particularly proud of serving under Joe Biden of all of them. Why? I mean, that would be my question. What exactly in particular? Is it because of the COVID-19 pandemic? He says, while I am moving on from my current position, I am not retiring. After more than 50 years of government service, I plan to pursue the next phase of my career while I still have so much energy and passion for my field. I want to use what I've learned as NIAID director to continue to advance science and public health and to inspire and mentor the next generation of scientific leaders as they help prepare the world to face future infectious disease threats. So, and then to finish it off, he says, over the coming months, I will continue to put my full effort, passion, and commitment into my current responsibilities, as well as help prepare the Institute for a leadership transition. NIH is served by some of the most talented scientists in the world, and I have no doubt that I'm leaving this work in very capable hands. Thanks to the power of science and investments in research and innovation, the world has been able to fight deadly diseases and help save lives around the globe. I am proud to have been part of this important work and look forward to helping to continue to do so in the future. Okay, so sorry about that. So this means that he is not retiring, and he's even mentioned that the power of science and investments have allowed this to happen, and that he's planning on continuing to use the skills that he's been using for the last however many decades in government service and moving them forward. Now, he is 81 years old, so he is likely moving on to a company or an organization of some sort. So I know that there are some ideas out there that he's going to write books and do speaking engagements. I don't think that's what he's doing. I actually think he's going to move on to something like one of the three organizations that would be my bet. I would bet either, I could add maybe a fourth onto there. So the WHO, he may go work for the WHO. He may go work for the Bill Gates Foundation. He may go work for Gavi, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccine Initiative, which is a vaccine organization heavily funded by the Bill Gates Foundation. So it would be almost an extension of the Bill Gates Foundation, since that's where they receive the bulk of their money. Same thing with the WHO, gets a lot of money from the Bill Gates Foundation, which I think Fauci would probably be moving on into the Bill Gates ecosystem of some kind. Or I would see Fauci moving on to Moderna and sitting on the board of Moderna, which was the government vaccine, essentially. The government-funded vaccine was Moderna. And Fauci apparently gets some money from Moderna, but we don't know how much. He won't answer that question. He becomes extremely elusive. So it would make sense that he would go and work for one of these organizations. That means, so think of it this way. If Fauci moves on, and he is at, let's say, Moderna, then you can absolutely bet if he's sitting on the board of Moderna or working in some capacity at Moderna that he's going to be pushing for future vaccines and even mandates. Absolutely will be doing this. So we could anticipate for another 10 years, Fauci is going to be in a position where he's going to be lobbying government officials in his new chair of wherever he is. And he'll have a lot of clout and a lot of power, especially amongst, and maybe even, I would say exclusively Democrats, but I can't really say that, because if he goes and moves to an organization such as Moderna, let's say, a company like Moderna, they give a lot of money to politicians, left and right. They've been giving a lot more to the left lately, pharmaceutical companies in general. Not sure exactly of Moderna and where they're putting their money, but largely a lot of that money, most of them have been putting it mostly towards Democrats for the last several years, because they were trying to counter Democrats' desire for Medicare for all and for lowering prescription drug costs. So they then instead bought off those politicians essentially by dumping a ton of money into the party. And if Fauci then, but they still do give a lot of money to Republicans. So if Fauci is sitting on the board of Moderna, you can anticipate a lot of lobbying that is going to be happening, and very powerful lobbying, because there's money behind it. With Fauci right now, there's no money behind him. He's in charge of a government institution. But when he leaves and he's now the spokesperson for a company with a lot of money, I mean, imagine, or if he goes to work for Pfizer, I don't think it would be Pfizer though. I do think he'd be more likely to join Moderna. But just imagine if he were sitting on the board of Pfizer and he had the clout that he has amongst the Democratic base and amongst Democratic politicians, and he then goes and lobbies with all of that money to back up what he's requesting. That actually puts him in a more dangerous position than he is right now, because the real leaders of this pandemic have been the big money interests. That is Fauci. Yes, he's giving a lot of guidance and a lot of people listen to him. And a lot of the news organizations, of course, interview Fauci and promote and amplify his message. But they're also getting a lot of money from Big Pharma. So if he goes and works for Big Pharma, then I think that we're in a worse situation with Fauci leaving his current position than him staying. Same thing if he goes off to somewhere in the Bill Gates ecosystem. If he goes in the Bill Gates ecosystem, again, loads of money, disproportionate amounts of money being dumped into the medical community through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. disproportionate amount of money going into research, into names of institutions that we trust, like Johns Hopkins, Imperial College of London, right? All of these various different organizations that have been guiding and leading the pandemic. A lot of that money comes from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we know that Bill Gates has, for whatever reason, a real strong, he really believes in vaccines. I mean, to me, Bill Gates almost is like the opposite of like Jenny McCarthy, for example, who was extremely anti-vaccine and called a lot of attention to vaccines and potential harm for vaccines, and maybe did so from a space that was, very emotional. Whether she be right or wrong, I don't know. I'm not making a judgment on that. I'm just saying that it became emotional. It became part of her battle cry. And it seems like the same sort of thing has happened with Bill Gates. This is just part of his battle cry. He's emotional about it. He's not even seeing straight, as we've seen now. I mean, we have evidence of that with the COVID pandemic and the way he spoke about the vaccines with so much conviction. And it really did boil down to just faith, right, when it came to the vaccines, because they ultimately did not work the way that they were touted to have worked. So you go work for a guy with those kinds of billions of dollars, and that money, those billions of dollars, is flowing all around into the medical establishment. Then the medical community they must in many ways either proclaim the agenda to be accurate and scientific, which they've done, and we've seen this throughout the pandemic, even when it wasn't correct, or they have to dance around and tiptoe, and they can't come out and just criticize whatever that request may be. So if the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is extremely invested into vaccines, as we know, then in the future, if there's another pandemic, or even just with COVID-19, we're going to see year after year after year, more and more vaccines being pushed. And we're going to see Bill and Melinda Gates and Fauci, wherever role he is in, whichever company he ends up in or organization, pushing for these vaccines. So I don't know if Fauci leaving the NIAID is actually I don't know if it's going to be better or worse. I actually think it's going to be worse, quite frankly. So I do think it's worse. I don't think that that is my read on this, is that we shouldn't be celebrating just yet. I think he actually becomes more dangerous with power and money behind him. So we will wait and see. He will, of course, announce where he is headed, I would imagine, at the beginning of next year. So he's announced his leaving the government position that he's in, the many positions he's in. He is going to then run off to wherever and make a fortune. He probably will need it because he's probably going to want to lawyer up, would be my guess, considering the way that Republicans are talking. But American people still have a lot of questions. He's probably banking on politicians and Americans moving on in their minds to something else and not caring to question him or drag him into congressional hearings and make him part of the news cycle. He's probably hoping for that. And if he has a bunch of money, not only just through the companies that are investing in these politicians that can kind of tamper down on those investigations, or he personally ends up with a lot of money that allows him to lawyer up, that is what I see in the future for Anthony Fauci. So thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a segment. And I will see you next time.